Good morning and welcome to this morning's Surrey Board of Trade Surrey Hot Topic Dialogue, the Surrey Police Transition Update. And ladies and gentlemen, public safety infrastructure matters to business. I'm Anita Huberman, I'm CEO of the Surrey Board of Trade, and this is a dialogue with the audience to provide an update to our business community on what is happening with the police transition update, best practices, opportunities, and issues. And yes, the Surrey Board of Trade has a long, formal standing position in this area. However, this event is about dialogue, as I mentioned, and this morning's session is being recorded. And our hope is to ensure that decision makers are willing to hear from you today during the dialogue, to hear your ideas. This is public engagement. I ask all of you during this morning's presentations and during the dialogue to be respectful in your comments. We're all here this morning because we care about Surrey, and Surrey is going to be the largest city in British Columbia. I'd like to thank our Business and International Trade Center sponsors. So anyone who's starting a business, needing business support, needing global business connections, they come to the Surrey Board of Trade. And that's the law firm of Fasken, the accounting firm of PwC, and the Chambers of Commerce Group Insurance Plan represented by S&F Benefits. Let's give them a great round of applause. And events at the Surrey Board of Trade simply could not take place without sponsorship. We host over 100 different events. So thank you to our community sponsor, Commissionaires. And our marketing sponsors, the Surrey Now Leader Media Group and the Newton BIA. Our government representatives in the room, please help me welcome City of Surrey Councillor Jack Hundal, City of Surrey Councillor Stephen Pettigrew, City of Surrey Councillor Brenda Locke, I believe City of Surrey Councillor Linda Annis is here, yes. City of Maple Ridge Councillor Ahmed Youssef. And we're doing great work together on Fraser River Economic Development, so thank you for attending. Also, City of Maple Ridge Councillor Ryan Svensson. And representing our different Surrey MLAs, MLA Tracy Reddies is represented by Debbie Ward. Representing MLA Stephanie Cadu is Kieran Dollywall. And representing Jenny Sims is Jennifer Campbell. The BC Legislature is sitting, so they all need to be in Victoria. So thank you for those dignitaries for attending today. Just a couple of things that I wanted to mention before we get right into why you're here this morning. It is Pink Shirt Day. Yes. So every Wednesday on February 26th marks Pink Shirt Day, a date when each year Canadians are asked to take a stand against bullying, and to make that stance public by including an article of pink clothing in their ensemble, by including in just making sure that they're recognizing the movement to show their support for safe and inclusive schools, workplaces, and communities. This year, the theme for Pink Shirt Day is to lift each other up. And ladies and gentlemen, the Surrey Board of Trade, we have been recognizing bullying in the workplace for the past 10 years. And bullying and disrespectful behavior in the workplace leads to lost work time, mental health disability claims, and high employee attrition rates. Bullying affects the overall health of a workplace. An unhealthy workplace can have many effects, and this includes increased absenteeism, increased turnover, increased stress, increased costs for employee assistance programs, increased risk for accidents, decreased productivity and motivation, decreased morale, reduced corporate image and customer confidence, and poor customer service. In fact, WorkSafe BC, a member of the Surrey Board of Trade, has also developed policies and resources related specifically to workplace bullying and harassment. And the Treasury Board of Canada, our federal government, has published People-to-People Communication, Preventing and Resolving Harassment for a Healthy Workplace, because we want to make sure that all of our workplaces are as productive as they can possibly be, not only for bottom line purposes, but to ensure that we have that morale to sustain our businesses and to move our businesses up. So thank you to those that are wearing pink today, and please spread the word that we will not tolerate bullying in the workplace. The second thing that I wanted to mention, as I mentioned, public safety matters to business. In the Surrey Board of Trade, we have been leaders in both provincial and federal government advocacy on the issue of cybercrime. We put cybercrime on both the provincial and national business agenda. Our policy specifically states increased integration amongst governments and policing agencies on cybercrime, promoting digital literacy by establishing best practices for cyber resilience, because small and medium-sized businesses drive Canada's economy, but they are not paying attention to the effects of cybercrime and the growing effects of cybercrime. So we're asking both levels of government to invest additional financial and skilled human resources to the National Cybersecurity Centre, and to give more resources to our policing agencies to help investigate and warn public about new and emerging cyber threats, not only from a local perspective, but also from an international perspective. And I'm so pleased to welcome, just to tell you a little bit about the work from Simon Fraser University right here in Surrey, to tell you about a ransomware survey that they're engaging in. So please help me welcome Barry Cartwright to the stage.
Thank you for the introduction, Anita. They were very kind to give us a few minutes to talk to you about this. And they also told me I've got about 5 minutes, so if I go over the time limit, the music is going to start playing, and it's going to get louder and louder. So I'm going to talk really fast. Just a little bit of background. The International Cybercrime Research Centre was launched in 2008 at Simon Fraser University's Surrey campus by the BC Minister of Labour and Citizen Services, in partnership with Simon Fraser University's School of Criminology and the Society for the Policing of Cyberspace, also known by the acronym PoliCyb. Our objective or mission statement is to promote education and conduct research in the areas of cybercrime prevention, detection and response, in collaboration with the police, public and private sectors at the regional, national, and international levels. In the past, we've conducted research into online child exploitation, online extremism, online money laundering and hacking forums, just to mention a few of the projects. We recently completed a project for the Department of Defense where we were tackling the problem of disinformation warfare attacks mounted by hostile disinformation foreign agencies using artificial intelligence and machine learning solutions to discriminate between real and fake news on social media. I probably don't have to tell you what ransomware is. In May 2017, the WannaCry ransomware paralyzed the health services in England. In October of last year, Life Labs in Canada was hit by a ransomware attack that severely impacted the company and its 15 million patients all across Canada. These incidents of ransomware have increased by about 109% over the past 2 years, estimated to cost over $75 billion a year. And apart from the demonstrable financial burden, there's a loss of employee and owner productivity, which is difficult to put a dollar figure on. In particular here, I'm talking about the kind of locking ransomware, which encrypts the non-system files on a victim's computer and offers to decrypt them in return for payment. Simply put, it's a form of criminal extortion that preys upon the vulnerability of the average computer user, and it's estimated that about 75% of Canadian companies end up paying the ransomware demands. The International Cybercrime Research Centre at SFU is presently launching a study of ransomware attacks on businesses in British Columbia. This study, Anita was talking about cooperation with different levels of government. It's sponsored in part by the Partnership Engagement Grant from the Canadian Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, and we are conducting it in cooperation with our community partner, the E-Division Digital Forensic Service of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. We're undertaking this study with the expectation of gaining new insights into the real incidents of ransomware attacks, how often those ransomware attacks are actually reported to the police, how police response is perceived by those who do choose to report to the police, the reasons why ransomware victims don't report to the police, how much they end up paying to get their files decrypted, if they elect to pay the ransom, whether they're able to negotiate the amount of the ransom or the payoff time, whether their files are actually restored after they pay out the money. We're trying to identify which business sectors or types of businesses are most vulnerable, and we're trying to identify protective measures such as cyber insurance or what kinds of effects we have if people have their own in-house cyber security or hire external cyber security firms. From this study, we hope to develop a report that will be made available to BC businesses, and in particular through constituent agencies such as the Surrey Board of Trade, who are kind enough to let us talk about this today. That report will contain recommendations for best practices and procedures based on the lessons learned from the studies. Now, we can't possibly contact all 500,000 of the businesses in British Columbia via phone or email, and we expect if we emailed them mentioning ransomware and an online survey in the same breath, they'd just be screened out. So that's why we're making direct contact with organizations such as the Surrey Board of Trade, asking if they're willing to help us out by posting a brief blurb about the online survey or a hyperlink to the survey on their website, or notifying people through online mailouts. The survey is anonymous. We're not collecting information that would allow us to identify businesses or individuals. So far, we've had a buy-in from a number of chambers of commerce and other business associations. We're trying to cover all industry sectors: farming, construction, retail. We're trying to draw as wide and representative a sample as possible. And we're hoping that not just people that have been, or businesses that have been affected by ransomware will participate, but all businesses, so we have a comparison group so we can study protective factors and get a better sense of the amount of victimization. So if you're here today and you're involved in a business as an owner or manager, or you belong to another organization that perhaps has a list of clientele, you could please keep an eye out for a message about the study or a link to the study from whichever business association or economic development organization you're affiliated with. We have an exhibition booth out in the foyer, which the Board of Trade was kind enough to give us. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the survey or about cybercrime in general. We're always on the lookout for potential community partners, new ideas for cyber problems that the community itself would like to see investigated. And I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to listen to me. When you teach university, you get to speak to large captive audiences where they have to listen to you, whether they feel like it or not. It's a great feeling. I recommend it to anybody who likes to do public speaking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barry. And we're going to be emailing out that link to that survey because it's going to provide us with good data around how to counter cybercrime, mitigation measures for cybercrime, which is a growing issue for our business community. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Surrey has announced a transition from the Surrey RCMP as Surrey's police force public safety infrastructure to a municipal police force. And today we invited the Honourable Wally Oppal, Chair of the province's Police Transition Committee, to provide us with an update on the Surrey Police transition and to provide his perspective also on public safety infrastructure. After the presentation, as I mentioned, there will be a question period. There's a microphone in the middle of the room, and so think about your questions and your comments to be addressed very briefly, and we will proceed from there. But now it is my pleasure to welcome from Botton Law, Mr. Wally Oppal.
So, Anita, what's happening in Surrey these days? Is anything exciting going on out here? I see a lot of media here. There must be something of note that's taking place out here that causes them to come here to hear some pearls of wisdom from some people. I want to first of all commend the people from Surrey who have taken an interest in this very vital issue. I don't know if there are issues that are more important than the issues of public safety and crime and policing. And I can tell you that I've been deluged and inundated by emails and phone calls of people who are interested in what's going on here with respect to the transition from the RCMP into a municipal police force. And as a matter of fact, for the better part of the last 5 months, I've spent about an hour on the phone listening to people, returning your calls, returning your emails as to what your concerns are about what's happening. And I commend you for doing that, because really that's at the heart of our democratic process, that you take an interest in something as vital as policing. I was assigned to do a commission of inquiry into policing in the 1990s. And what had happened was that the police had shot 3 people and quickly conducted their own investigations and exonerated themselves, and a lot of people were upset, particularly the provincial government. So I was assigned to do a commission of inquiry into policing, and our terms of reference were widespread. How do we select police chiefs? How do we promote people within police forces? What type of training do we have? What about high-speed chases? What type of weapons should the police have? What about public accountability of police? What about women in policing? We did all of that. But the most important issue that we came out at the end of the day is policing is too important to be left to the police. And that's where you come in. You, the community, have to get involved in the type of policing that you want in any given jurisdiction, because public safety is at the heart of our living conditions in whatever community that we live in. So congratulations to the people of Surrey for what you've done. Regardless of how this issue plays out at the end of the day, the fact is that you have taken ownership of this matter. Now I'm going to go in and talk to you about what we did and what we're doing and where the process might take you. But at the outset, I want to tell you that I can't hold a referendum. That's not up to me. That's not within my mandate. Statutorily, by law, I'm not entitled to do that. Secondly, the province would be far-fetched to hold a referendum on this issue, because this is a municipal issue. So by law, if any referendum is going to be held, it would have to be held within the municipal law and the municipal boundaries. So I want to put those issues to rest, because most of the material that I receive and are asking me to get involved in this issue and to hold a referendum. I want to pause here to note that of all the Western democracies, I think Canada has the best policing system. And I say that from being involved in the criminal justice system for well over 40 years, and I've done a number of inquiries now into policing. People think I'm an expert in policing, and so I let people think that, and because of all the different things that I've done over the years. But, you know, when you compare our system of policing to what's going on in other Western democracies. Compare us to the U.S., where shootings are taking place of unarmed people, no accountability, no prosecutions, no civil organizations that hold police accountable. It goes on and on. In the visible minority communities, the Latin communities, Latino communities, and the African American communities, shootings are routine, and nothing much gets done. Australia, in matter of fact, in the U.S., corruption is pretty pervasive. Chicago, Philadelphia, New Orleans, Houston, Atlanta, New York, Los Angeles have all had major inquiries concerning corruption. Baltimore now has 35 officers under indictment for thefts, break-ins, and drug dealing. You may remember the movie The French Connection, which was actually based on factual material. In that case, the NYPD seized 100 pounds of pure heroin. That pure heroin disappeared from the lockers of the NYPD. And nothing was done about it. So when you look at that and compare what we have here, we've got police officers who actually take an interest in our communities and are involved in the proactive parts of our communities. I think we do a pretty good job. I was in Australia about 15 years ago speaking at a conference. It was an anti-corruption conference. They've had 3 royal commissions in 10 years in Australia on police corruption. Scotland Yard had 12 officers under indictment for corruption. So we don't have those types of challenges. So I think we do a pretty good job. But our times are changing, and so there's a demand for accountability. Is what we're doing today adequate for what's going to happen down the road? So from that perspective, we have to ask ourselves whether or not our present policing system is adequate to address the challenges of mental illness, social issues, the socioeconomic problems that police now encounter. Police duties are far more complex than they were at any time in the past. The job of the police is more than just going out and apprehend people who have committed criminal acts. It's a lot more complex. So we have to be mindful of that. I think it's important to know in a thriving community such as Surrey, and Anita pointed this out, that Surrey is going to be the largest city in the province of British Columbia very shortly. And so a lot of things are changing here. But if you look back at the history of policing in Surrey, Surrey had its own police force in 1887. They had a dozen officers at that time. But the bulk of the policing in the province was conducted by the BC Provincial Police Force. They were the BC Provincial Police Force, and they policed most of the province. So that situation existed until 1950. 1950 was a pivotal year in policing in this province, because what happened was the RCMP then became the Provincial Police Force. And it's been said that there was no real inquiry, no real study, no commission. The Attorney General of the day got on the phone with the Solicitor General in Ottawa, and in half an hour they agreed that they were going to do away with the BC Provincial Police Force and bring in the RCMP. That's how it was done. That's what due process was like in 1950. So Surrey had an opportunity at that time to decide what type of policing they wanted and what type of agencies they wanted. So they disbanded the Surrey Provincial Police Force, which had I think a membership of about 15 or 20 people, and they signed on with the RCMP. And so in 1951, the RCMP became the police force for Surrey. And that's where all of this starts. Now, I think it's important to remember that over the years, the RCMP have done a pretty good job of policing this province and have done a pretty good job of policing. I speak a lot from experience. In a former lifetime, I was a special prosecutor, and I think I prosecuted about 50 murder cases. A lot of them came out of Surrey and Burnaby, and the RCMP officers did a great job in putting cases together, and they were really good police officers. And they did their job. And so they've done an excellent job, and I think this city and other cities in this province owe a debt of gratitude for the policing that the RCMP did in all those years. But it's important to remember that changes take place. As I mentioned, the RCMP were the provincial police force, and so what happened was that under the Police Act, the city of over 5,000 people has a choice. You can either establish your own police force, or you can have the RCMP, the provincial police force, do your policing for you. And you have to enter into an agreement with the province and with the with the federal government to have the RCMP be your city police force. And that's what Surrey has done. So Surrey had that choice in 1951, and that's what's happened. And as I said a moment ago, and I think this is my opinion, I think the Mounties have done a pretty good job. They've made mistakes, as had all police forces, but overall they have done a pretty good job of investigations and being in touch with the communities. And but you've got to remember here that the Police Act is the governing statute by which the province and cities operate policing. So what happens is that under the Police Act, the Solicitor General, who's the chief law enforcement officer of the province, has the responsibility and the mandate to ensure that public safety and public accountability is met. It's his responsibility to do that under the law. Similarly, the Police Act also states that cities with populations of over $5,000 have a choice. They can either have their own police force or have an agreement with the RCMP, as I said a moment ago. So under the Act, any city that wants to make a change can make that change by requesting that the province gets involved in mandating such a change. So that's what's happened here, and I don't have to tell you what happened in November 2018, because at that time, the province, or the city of Surrey, did what they needed to do and what they had to do under the Police Act. And they asked the province to assist in operating and establishing their own police force. They were entitled to do that under the Act and also under the agreement that they had with the RCMP and the province. And and when that happens, that sets in motion under the Police Act a number of events. The province then has to entertain, by law, any application made by any city with a population exceeding 5,000 to assist that community in establishing their own police force. But they have to ensure that whatever city wants to do that has to have certain standards and has to maintain and meet certain requirements before the province will sanction the independent police force. And so that's what's happened here. So the city of Surrey making the application in November 2018, then they did a number of background work and requirements and had a sort of an evidentiary basis from which they wanted to proceed, and they gave that to the province. And on the 22nd of August last year, the Solicitor General said that he was giving Surrey the green light to proceed because under the Act, the Surrey had made a lawful request, and under the Act, the provincial government was obligated to hear that application, and by examining the evidence and the material and the facts that were involved, that would form the basis of a Surrey police force if they met those standards. And I just told you a minute ago, the Solicitor General has to be satisfied that whoever does the policing meets the standards of public safety, accountability, and all of those factors that are required for meeting public safety. So the Solicitor General has done that. So after that was done, the they appointed a transition committee. And so I'm a member, I'm the chair of the committee, and a number of the members of the committee who are here today, and I'm grateful for you for all the work that you have done. And I can tell you that the people who are part of that committee who are experts in policing, we've got people like Kurt Griffiths, a well-known criminologist, Bob Rose, a former deputy police chief of Vancouver, Doug Lepard, another police chief, and people from the RCMP who assisted in the transition. So we met for 4 months, and and at the end of the day, we prepared a report that I think it's 450 pages, and it's not accessible to the public, but if it is in the near future, it'd be good insomnia correction for any of you that want to look at that, and because so many of you have called me and you want to see that report, and I'm telling you that I can't give it to you. It's my obligation under the Act to give that to the Director of Policing, who is Brenda Butterworth-Carr, former Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP. She will examine what we did during the course of our deliberations and then give that to the Solicitor General, Mike Farnworth, and he and the provincial government will decide whether or not Surrey has met all the necessary steps to go on to the next step and to establish its own police force. Some of the issues that we dealt with were police boards. A police board is the governing body of any police body under the municipal structure. And what about recruitment, pensions, transition? What happens to ongoing investigations? What happens to ongoing prosecutions? And all of those, what about pensions? What about where are the officers going to come from? What about the selection for a new police chief? All of those things that are matters that we dealt with during the course of our deliberations. I think it's a sound report, and those are some of the factors that we looked at, and we gave that material to the director of policing. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the factors, and I spoke to you now about police boards, and I told you that one of the mandates, requirements of the police board is that you have to select a police chief. Now, the police chief is a CEO of any police department. So it's important to note that municipal police departments in our province have to have a police board, the governing body, the representatives of the community who decide what community priorities are. So the police board is really the heart of any police department. So it's important that the police board be made up from citizens of the community. And so that's what will be done if they come on to the next step, if they meet the requirements so far. It's important to note that the distinction between the RCMP and the municipal police is the RCMP have no police boards. Now, they have a requirement under the Police Act to have police committees. And when we did our inquiry in the 90s, I was flabbergasted at the lack of any real any presence of police committees. I don't know why any city that's being policed by the RCMP doesn't have a police committee. And I really think that's the fault of city councils, and it's the fault of the mayors in those councils that have the RCMP as their police force. I should tell you that these opinions are my own. I don't want to saddle the province with some of these comments. I don't speak on behalf of the province, but my opinion is if you want really accountability, if you want something that the police reach out to the communities to find out what the priorities are, then you should have a police committee. And I remember we had hearings in 1992 about this, and I think we were in Richmond or something. I can't remember, but I asked the mayor who appeared before our commission, and I said, does it trouble you, sir, that your police chief is picked for you in Ottawa? He said, I never really thought about that. I was shocked when that was that type of a response. See, as I stood at the moment, at the beginning here, policing is a way too important to left for the police. It's up to the communities to decide what you want, what your priorities are, what your issues are in any particular community. And that's the distinction between the RCMP and the federal. Now, I'm not being critical of the RCMP because the RCMP bring other talents and other advantages to the table. And as I said a moment ago, they do a pretty good job of operationally independence. So that's good. But there are two principles that are fundamentally important to policing. First, the police have to be accountable to civilian authority. And secondly, the police have to be operationally independent. So you can't have a situation where politicians tell the police who to investigate. And our principles in this country are that the police decide for themselves independently who ought to be investigated, who ought not to be investigated. You know what's happening in the U.S. now, where you have a president who fires the head of the FBI, decides who's going to be investigated, who isn't going to be investigated. And it's a terrible situation. It's on your way to a dictatorship when people at the top tell the police who to investigate and who they shouldn't investigate. And that's why our system is important, that we have an independent investigative system. And right now, if you have a complaint against an officer, you can go before the Office of the Public Complaint Commissioner in Victoria. Clayton Pecknold is now the holder of that office. And you can complain. That office then does an independent investigation. Let's assume for a minute the police have broken down a door, come into your office, or come into your home without any kind of a warrant. The Office of the Public Complaint Commission will investigate independently of the police, because it's really not appropriate, I think, for have the police to investigate themselves. So that's the reason for it. But the police investigate in the first instance, and the commissioner decides whether or not the public complaint against a particular officer was justified. Now, the RCMP doesn't have that process. And that's been a particular quarrel of mine since 1994, because I recommended at that time in our inquiry that the RCMP, as the provincial police force, must get involved in the provincial police complaint process. Right now, the RCMP has their own investigative agency, which is advisory in nature only. The commissioner decides in Ottawa whether or not a particular complaint is justified or isn't. But the hallmark of any democracy is that the police have to be accountable to civilian authority. There have to be independent people. And I think that's a weakness of the RCMP, and I think that something they are in the process of addressing. In any event, I've been sort of a voice in the wilderness all these years saying that the Mounties have to come into our complaint process. And I think that was a weakness of the RCMP, in spite of all the other strengths that they brought to our province when they did the policing as the provincial police force. So the other thing I want to talk to you about is costs. Now, we didn't do any type of analysis about costing. And there's a lot of debate out here, a lot of it uninformed, about the costing of what's going to take place. And there's a couple of factors that are beyond question, and that is that municipal police forces, on the whole, generally are more costly than the RCMP. There are a couple of reasons for that. There's what's called the subsidy factor, and that is that any police force, any municipality or city that's policed by the RCMP gets a 10% subsidy from the federal government. So that helps in costing. You don't get that if you have a municipal police force. Secondly, the Mounties have not had a union, but they're getting one now. So whatever advantage that the RCMP had at that time by being less costly is probably going to be corrected. And by corrected, right now as we speak, there are negotiations going on in Ottawa between the RCMP union and the Federal Treasury Board. And you can assume from that the gap in pay between the provincial constables, like the VPD and Delta and Port Moody and New Westminster, will be narrowed, because I have no doubt, and again, this is my own opinion, that one of the things that's going to happen when these negotiations take place is that the Mounties will be getting huge raises to coincide with and meet the sort of the gap that exists now between provincial and the federal RCMP. So that's something that needs to be considered down the road, because a lot of comments have been made in the public about the cost of policing, and this will eventually be done. But it's important to note that at this stage, that the setting of budgets and the collective agreement which will come if the next step is taken, if the province gives the mandate to take the next step, and the police board sets the budgets. The police boards set the wage requirements in governance, in negotiations with the police unions. And the municipal police forces in this province have a union, and they bargain. And right now, I think Delta is the highest paid police force in the province. But I'm sure the others will catch up. So policing is expensive. It doesn't matter how you look at it. But let's look back at the public safety standards that we Canadians expect, the ethical standards that we expect, that we have received from our system of policing. So I know that probably it will cost more. I don't know. We haven't done any kind of a study, and that's to be determined down the road, and that will be subject to whatever the police board and the negotiations take place down the road. That'll take place later on. Having said that, that probably it will cost more. We don't know how much, but the trade-off there is you have local control over your own police force, and if it comes to fruition that Surrey has its own police force, they will be in a better position to control standards, to control service complaints. They'll be in a better position to see what community priorities are in the various jurisdictions, the various community centers in Surrey. So that's what will take place if all of this takes place. Again, a lot of what I said to you this morning is are opinions that are my own, but they've come from material that I've read over the years, and the work that I've done is, I think this is a 4th or 5th policing inquiry that I've been involved in. And again, I go back to, I want to thank you for all that you've done in getting involved in this issue. This is good. This is good. It's fundamental to any democracy that you do that, regardless of how this plays out at the end of the day, and regardless of what the province decides on Surrey's application. The fact is that you, as citizens in this jurisdiction, in this city, should be proud of the fact that you've taken an issue and you've embraced this issue, you've offered opinions, and that's what a democracy is all about. And I think I've gone on way too long. If I beat my time limit here. Did I have a time limit? No, but I want to tell you that as a former judge, nobody sets time limits on us. So I pretty well can go on the way I want, right? So, okay. So I'll entertain whatever questions that you have. So.
Thank you so much, Wally. So what we're going to do is take 3 questions at a time. And if you can just stand at the microphone, indicate your name, your company name, indicate your question very, very briefly. But I'm going to start it off, if you don't mind.
You're the chair. You can do what you want.
The CEO, actually.
Yeah, CEO.
Our chair is Mr. Doug Tennant there.
All right, okay.
So just a couple of things, and if you need a pen just to write down these questions, that would be great. So can you have a police board with an existing RCMP force? Number 1. Number 2, in our BC budget presentation that the Surrey Board of Trade made last year, we had said that the transition to a municipal police force will cost the province. The training, for example, of the Justice Institute of BC, other infrastructure pieces that actually weren't prevalent in BC Budget 2020, the presentation last week. So your perspective on what the cost to the province will be. And number 3 is that the officer in charge, as far as Surrey is concerned, is actually hired by the mayor and by council, not from Ottawa. So can you just explain that perspective as well?
Okay, I can't say what the costs will be. There's no doubt that the province will have more, will have to get involved more, because the Surrey Police Department, if it's established, will have an impact on Delta, will have an impact on Langley, will have an impact on all the other neighboring police departments. So no doubt that the province, and it will impact on the overall policing strategy that the province has. So that no doubt will militate an increase in costs. Your first question was, can they have a police board? You can have a police board. The question you have to ask with the RCMP, you could have one. It has been done, I think, in Nova Scotia, but that yeah, okay, yeah, PEI. So, but the factor is this: you would have to negotiate with the federal government as to the type of power and authority that the police board under an RCMP jurisdiction would have, because the police board, as we know it in this province, is governed by the Police Act. So they have a wide range of authority and wide range of powers, from budgets to a whole bunch of other things. So that's, you have to ask yourself, if you're an RCMP jurisdiction, you have a police board, how effective and how powerful, how much authority would have that police board have? So, okay.
And what about the officer in charge, you know, how they're chosen? Because in Surrey, as far as I know, that choice is made locally in terms of who their officer in charge is. Yeah.
Well, I think that if good for the RCMP that they're giving the local city the choice of picking who their chief of police would be. That wasn't the case before. The only concern that I have sometimes is that it's a multiple choice, isn't it? So they give you 5 names from which to choose, but and it's not the same as you're having your own police force, where you interview people, you send out applications for chief of police. So, but having said that, I think the RCMP have done a great job in meeting with cities and municipalities, and the CEOs or the OCs are pretty proactive in this. So. Yeah.
So I'm going to keep going unless someone walks up to the microphone. So we know that the City of Surrey plan was based on the City of Vancouver's police department. Surrey in itself as a city, you can fit Burnaby, Richmond, Vancouver into our city limits. It's a large geographic area. Public safety is going to be different in Surrey. And so like business, you know, we're facing a skills shortage, human capital challenges. Tell us a little bit about in Vancouver's police transition plan for Surrey. Is Surrey going to hire Vancouver police officers to fill those spaces? Is there going to be an automatic transition from the RCMP, Surrey RCMP, to the municipal police force? Who is going to pay for 2 police forces at the same time?
Okay, good question. What will no doubt happen is that the police board, with having appointed a police chief, will then decide what type of officers they want, what type of recruitment policies will take place. In the advice we've given to the Director of Policing, we talk about recruitment, we talk about police training, and those are things that will have to be addressed. And the mayor and the mayor, the police board, mayor is the chair of the police board. He doesn't have a vote, but he's a chair, but he's a member of the police board, will decide what the salaries will be and what the costs will be and all of that. So that it'll be up to them. It'll be a local process that will decide that.
Okay, to the microphone.
This isn't really a question. My name is Annie Capps, and I've lived in Surrey almost 80 years.
Can you just speak right into
I
the
can't hear you.
microphone? Speak right into the
There?
microphone.
Okay. My name is Annie Capps, and I've lived in Surrey almost 80 years. And I just want to make a statement that the pervasive attitude and typical of the mayor and his four, who insist they don't vote as a bloc, is to ignore the citizens of Surrey. They say that they are open and that they are approachable, but they're not here. And it's a slap on the faces of the citizens of Surrey that when the council convened in November of 2018, 2 of them didn't even live in Surrey. And then here we see none of them attending this event, which is really quite crucial to all the citizens of Surrey.
Thank you very much. Next person.
My name is Ron Dix. I'm a citizen of Surrey and have been for the past 30 years. My question is whether or not your mandate and terms of reference make any reference to meaningful public consultation, and if yes, what does it say?
Public consultation in what respect?
Public consultation in relation to this transition and the attitude of the citizens as to whether they want it or not, and of course then in terms of the kinds of things that would be said to the citizens about the police.
I understand that. I understand the concerns, and I've heard those in volume for the last 6 months. You have to assume that under the Police Act, Surrey had the lawful authority to go to the province and say, we want our own police force. When that kicks in, the province then has a legal obligation to entertain that. And the province is in a somewhat difficult position, and I don't speak on behalf of the province here, but I can tell you that they're in a bit of a difficult position if they start to second guess what City Council wanted. And in 2018, City Council asked the province to start the process going. So that's the best way I can answer that. If the process for consultation was flawed, that's I can't do anything about that. That's all I can tell you.
Next.
Good morning, Wally. It's good to see you all again. My name is Larry Atkinson. I was a police officer here in Surrey from 1972 until 1989. I worked every section except ident at Surrey Detachment. I later got transferred downtown onto drug squad. I think my question is, in all the years of service I had in Surrey, Surrey was never up to establishment. We never were STE. I remember one time talking with our OIC who had come back from a meeting in the province and with the RCMP higher-ups. And we learned that everybody in the province they had all the establishment, they had all the manpower that they were entitled to. When I went to Surrey in 1972, I was member number 65. I don't know how many they have now, 780, 870. I mean, it's incredible. 840, thank you. And a
well-informed public, that's good.
I remember how busy I was. In an 8-hour shift, I had 44 calls right here in Guildford. That's the zone I worked. And I didn't have the most of all the guys on my watch. The guy that had the most calls that night had 52. And there was probably 25 members on our watches at the time. So I guess I'm wondering, when I left the force, I went to the Justice Institute, and I was an instructor for the better part of 15 years. Where is Surrey going to get the members to fulfill the obligations?
Good question. There is a demand now for policing across the province. I don't know if you saw the article the other day in the Vancouver Sun. I have no doubt that some of the RCMP officers may transfer. Some of the VPD officers who live here may transfer. They'll be recruiting their own. And so that's a challenge that they'll meet. But they'll have to keep in mind that the standards cannot be compromised, and I'm sure that the police chief of the day and the police department of the day will ensure that whatever is done in a fair way and in the best interests of Surrey. Okay, all right. Thank you.
If we just can keep the questions and comments very brief and get to your question right away.
Good morning, Justice Oppal. My name is Gurbakh Saini, and I am resident of Surrey. You have mentioned if there's a will on the part of City of Surrey, a police board can be established because there's precedent in Eastern Canada. So that was one of the false information that was given to the citizen, that it's not possible. Secondly, when the last council was elected, it was elected on the fear. There were a lot of crime, people got killed. There was a rally which was attended by 10,000 people. Our present mayor picked from there and used the fear of the people to say, I want to change. It should not happen that way. It should be a people's concern. It should be people who should be deciding. Mayor alone should not have that choice, especially when he made remarks which were not truthful to represent that. Okay. Thank you.
So next question, please. Go ahead.
Mr. Oppal, first of all, I say what most people think. We have got a very corrupt mayor in Surrey, BC, which in a 650-page report that was found by some people that dug through the Freedom of Information Act, right, that showed the percentages were twisted. It showed that we did not want a Surrey PD force. We wanted to stay with the RCMP. Now it's going to cost us another $8,000 to go through the Freedom of Information Act to do this process again. Now, have you taken that into account? Because you know it's out there. The 600-page report that, you know, when he went around and showed the cars and the trucks and they loaded the ballot boxes and all that kind of stuff. Have you seen that report, sir?
No, I haven't seen any other report.
Well,
we've glanced over. I've had all the necessary material that was given to us, and so we had a lot of expertise in the room, and
well, I'm sorry, but I know Jack and Brenda, the councillors that are here. Yeah. Isn't there a 650-page report out? That's where our transparency was supposed to come.
I'm familiar with what's there. I haven't read.
Well, I think you better add that. Take another month and add that to your report before you make any decision, because he's a very deceitful, non-transparent, crooked mayor.
So just a reminder, you want to keep it respectful, please. Thank you very much, sir. I understand. Yes, Rebecca.
Good morning. I'm Rebecca Smith. I'm the president of the Cloverdale Chamber of Commerce. I'm also the executive director of the Surrey Hospice Society. I have actually two questions, very brief and very specifically, hopefully geared towards what your report is about. It's my understanding that the Police Act stipulates levels or numbers of police based on a per capita basis. Is that correct?
Yeah, I assume so, yes.
Okay. So I'm wondering if the transition report has stipulated the number of police that Surrey would need based on our per capita. It seems to me that the budget that was presented in front of us ignored the fact that we grow by 1,500 people every month, and that there has not been an increase in number in RCMP to meet that need. I'm wondering if that played a role in your report.
Well, sorry.
The second question. We have seen in the past issues with siloing between law enforcement agencies. The case coming to mind immediately is that of Willie Picton, where there were multiple jurisdictions involved in that case, and the information wasn't being communicated between the different agencies, and therefore murders continued for decades. What, if anything, has your report addressed in that for our transition, and is that being addressed in what we may be faced with as a Surrey police force?
Okay, that's a good question, particularly the last one. I did the Picton inquiry, so I know a little bit about what happened there, You're absolutely right. The information wasn't shared between the VPD and the RCMP. And had it been shared, some women would have, their lives would have been saved. You're right. And that's a matter that has to be addressed, and I think they're doing a lot better job because they amended the act, and they have a real-time intelligence center now wherein if a mother has a daughter missing in Campbell River, it goes on a system so the police in Vancouver and the RCMP would have immediate knowledge of that. They're obligated to investigate all complaints involving missing vulnerable people. So we've come a long way, and hopefully that won't happen again, the horrible things that happened during the Picton years. Yeah.
So has the transition included
Well,
that issue in the plan?
Well, this is something that, those are policy things that the mayor and council, or so the mayor and the board will decide as to what particular policies each police force will implement. And, you know, the people who will be no doubt chosen for the police chief and all those positions will be well-qualified people. We have a very high standard of policing in Canada. You can't get to be an officer here unless you have some kind of post-secondary education, and they're highly trained. So I expect that a lot of the mistakes that have been made in the past will be addressed.
Thank you.
Next.
Good morning. My name is James Stewart. You mentioned earlier in your presentation that change happens, but really it has to be thoughtful change and not just change for change's sake. So the one real question here today, it seems to me, and in this whole process is, will Surrey be better off for having made the change? It seems to me that change is justified if it improves Surrey, but it's not sufficient for if change simply maintains the status quo with different players. Yeah. So asking that question, will Surrey be better off for making this change? Have you seen the evidence one way or the other?
I don't have a crystal ball to say they'll be better off. I don't know. And I think that I've pointed out certain advantages that are associated with municipal policing, and that includes local accountability and some of those things. But you know what? Every police force must be held accountable, and the community has to get involved. I said at the outset of my remarks that this community has to ensure that whatever happens in the future happens with the best interests of the city. And that can be done with the RCMP, it can be done with the municipal force. But I told you what the function of police boards is and their connection to the local community. So, okay.
Hi, I'm Sharon Nixon. I'm a citizen of Surrey. Taxpayers in Surrey want to be heard. If you can't help us, then who can? Tell us, how do taxpayers get their voice heard? We have to pay for this, and we deserve to have a say. So what do we do next?
Well, I can't give you political advice, but what I can say to you is what I said at the outset, that keep doing what you're doing and keep going to the political people who make the decisions and hold them accountable. You have to do that. And I think the city of Surrey, as I said at the outset, has to be proud the way that you've taken this issue and run with it. And that's all I can say, that make sure your voices are heard in any democracy. So.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Smith, and I also live in Surrey. And I am so upset. You know, I feel like I'm very shocked that you didn't know that the police chief was also appointed or by the mayor and council. When you say the mayor and our city hall is dysfunctional right now. When I go to the meetings, I am so frustrated. I cannot believe what's going on. And it's great that you say that it's good that we're involved, and I agree. But I feel like it's so hopeless that council is, there are four, the council is split. And the mayor votes and he gets his own way. He is not thinking about us, because when I look at what is happening, he does not let us speak. He does not listen. So I agree with the last woman who spoke. I don't know what to do next either. And so it feels so pointless that the mayor took all of the money from the cultural things, the activities, and put it all into some transition that only he and a few other people want. Or that's what I believe. But I'd like to know what everyone in Surrey believes, and what does everyone in Surrey want? Everyone should be involved. But it's so frustrating because it feels like people aren't listening. I commend the councillors who have left the committee and speak up for and do try to speak up for us. But I feel the mayor does not listen.
Okay. All right. Yep. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
G'day, sir. My understanding is that you've submitted your report to the province. You said it's on the desk of Brenda Butterworth Carr. Just wondering if the province has had any feedback on any significant issues with your report, if you guys have had some dialogue, and when you anticipate the province is going to come up with a decision, and if we, at that time, if the report's going to be released, and if we can see it at that time.
I don't know what the province will do. They'll no doubt look at what we have filed with them and the transition committee report, and they no doubt will, that's gone to the director of policing now. She will look at it and see whether or not it meets the standards that are necessary in order to keep Surrey safe. So, all right.
Any anticipation of a date that the province might be ready?
No, I can't say. Idea. It's, you know, keep in mind that while this is a burning issue here, the province has other issues that they're dealing with at the same time. So, so I can't say. I don't know where it is on the list of priorities in Victoria. So.
Thanks, sir.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Liz Walker. I've been a Newton resident since 1983, and I've seen a lot of changes in my community to where it was a very family-friendly community, a lot of participation at our local PAC and that, to a point now where I live in one of the worst crime-ridden areas of Surrey, according to patrol officers. Sir, Newton has been negatively impacted for the last couple of decades through mayor and council's work to clean up Wally. Okay, we've suffered from those impacts. So my questions are, you keep talking about accountability. Where is that? What does it look like? Because I'm very concerned about bias. We talk about a police board that will be, you know, manned by or people that will be there will be from the community, but which community exactly? Because Newton has for a very long time, we have the largest population of a community in Surrey, but we're often not heard, which was evident for the number of times I've been trying to save my community from rezoning problems and that, and not listened to. And actually, Mayor McCallum, I remember we filled up council chambers with well over 300 people opposing a rezoning. And we had 40 people speaking out against what they were proposing, and he listened to none of it. So that's my question. Where's the accountability, and how do we prevent bias so that certain communities that seem to, because we are a poor community, we do, you know, we have the highest concentration of non-market housing in all of Surrey, and we just don't seem to be heard.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. The only thing I can say, and you've addressed a number of issues there, and you just have to keep the decision makers apprised of your complaints and keep after them. That's all I can say. So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Dave Amro. I'm on a couple of committees. I'm with the Wally Committee Advisory Association. I'm also a petitioner with Ivan Scott. This should go back. You mentioned that the Attorney General looks at this and a safety thing. He got in with less officers than we have now. He should have had to put more in. Next, City of Surrey is twice the size of Vancouver, and we have only 840 officers. No. Vancouver has 1,365. How do you expect to get the job done? These guys are just, you don't give them enough credit. They should be heroes. They should stay. Right. And the cost is too much.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. Okay.
How's that say? Less officers, more money.
Next question, please.
Explain that to me.
Good morning. My name's Debbie Johnstone. First of all, I thank you very much for coming out and taking all of our questions, because I know that we have been filling up your cell phones and your emails. I am a big advocate for public safety, and of course that's what you've been talking about is our public safety here in Surrey. I don't know if you're aware, but it was just made apparent that the Public Safety Committee that Mayor McCallum disbanded last year, they have never met. And he disbanded our Public Safety Committee in favor of creating the Interim Police Transition Advisory Council. So I asked a long time ago just what it was that they brought to the plate is in terms of policing and public safety. And of course I never got an answer, and of course now we know that they've never met. So my big concern is the transparency, which doesn't exist. We are all very afraid of, we're talking about Mayor McCallum, not just a mayor. I sent an email to 12 mayors to ask them what they did with meetings. Like, was it commonplace to not meet for 7 months? And while they couldn't comment on anybody else's jurisdiction, they did tell me that they meet at least monthly or every 2 months so that they can give recommendation that's supported by staff and give recommendation to council to lead policy. Ooh, there's a one, right? We don't do that.
Your question, please.
So my question is, how are we being protected public safety-wise when you've just heard we don't have enough members? How is the mayor being in command, or the chief of his own police board? You've seen what he's done to our public safety here. How can we be assured that he's going to take care of us then?
Well, in the event that the application goes through and there is a police board, and you'll have a place to go to air your complaints. That's all I can tell you.
Thank you, Wally. In the past, I have been chair of the police committee in Surrey, which did liaise very closely with the RCMP for many years and had a very good relationship. But I will say that in listening over the past, and one of the reports that you did a while ago, particularly looking into the Picton investigation, was that you talked about regional policing, and you talked about a difference in the level of policing and those issues that might and should be, I guess, overseen by a regional police force. Perhaps you can comment on that, because changing and looking at the jurisdictions, there's like 17 or more municipalities here. Then we have transit police, and then we have other layers of police, and a lot of silos that certainly are in our communities, but we have no power over or no real relationship with. So, but regional policing always stuck in my mind as a very sensible thing when you get into gang violence, when you get into homicides, when police come to screeching halt on 120th and the Delta police on one side and RCMP on the other. And over time it has changed, and I think police forces are working closer together, but not quite. So regional policing, can you comment?
Well, regional policing has been on many people's radar. I recommended that in 1994, and one of the recommendations of the Picton inquiry that I chaired, we recommended the same thing. And this is a political issue that the province and the municipalities will eventually have to come to grips with, but I'm sure that it's part of a larger strategy of the province as to where we're going in policing. So, yeah.
This will be the second to last question, because I have the last question. Just one more.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah.
My name is Chip Boness. I'm a retired combat engineer officer, and spent time with the UN. I've lived and worked in 7 countries, such as Afghanistan, Iran, Cambodia, and the West Bank in the Middle East. What I see going on in Surrey is reminiscent of some of the things that go on in those countries. And that is why I became involved with this issue. I appreciate that your role here has been primarily technical, but you indicated to me earlier that it was also other things, as you put it. I accept that. At this time, this is a moment in our history in Canada when we see our democratic system in the act of failing. 15% of the electorate put that council in place, and they are running away with the will of the people, who are not blameless because they have failed to step up in the elections. It's our own fault, but that's no reason to acquiesce to it and to hide behind laws that were created a long time ago under very different circumstances. Sir, will you meet with us following this meeting or in the near future so that we can present to you the backstory behind some of this, of which I am certain you are well aware, and which cannot or should not probably be surfaced in public? Will you meet with us, sir?
Well, I've met with a lot of people from Surrey, and I've fielded calls, and I mentioned earlier, I've been on the phone for hours at a time. I don't know if it would be useful for you to meet with me. I was a chair of the transition committee. That job is now done, and I don't know what my role will be in the future, if in fact there is anything for me. But I'm sure that members of council and your MLAs and all of those people are there to hear your concerns. Okay?
So, may I supplementary, please? Yeah. Sir, I attended a meeting of the council on the 16th of November, at which there were 2 demonstrations. The first demonstration which the mayor spoke at was one particular segment of the population. A much larger demonstration across the square he chose to totally ignore. I observed this, and I am not steeped in Surrey or BC politics whatsoever, but what I saw was not representative of the will of the people.
All right. Okay.
Could you please suggest who we can meet with? And it has proven impossible to meet with the city council itself in large part, except for those courageous people who have decided to stand up against what is essentially railroading.
Well, the only thing look, I'm not here to give you political advice, but I would think that from a common sense perspective, you'd want to meet with city councilors and with your MLAs. So all right.
I would like to suggest also continuing, we're an advocacy organization at the Surrey Board of Trade, and in all of our advocacy, sending letters, communicating with your provincial decision makers, with Minister Farnworth, now Brenda Butterworth-Carr, is absolutely integral in this decision-making process, as we are as well for the Board of Trade's position. So I implore all of you, if you have a certain perspective, to do that. Just one final thing I wanted to ask Wally. Wally, public safety isn't only about policing. It's about wraparound services. So it's investments in mental health, youth, housing, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what is your perspective on that in the advent of a new Surrey police force?
You're absolutely right. The police can only do so much when it comes to crime prevention. Right now, the police are dealing with issues of homelessness, mental illness, poverty, and all of those things that really we foist onto the police. So it's unfair for society to expect the police to solve all of those issues. So those are issues that the community itself has to get involved in. Opioid crisis is an example, prevention, counseling, and all of those things that need to be done. You keep in mind that, when police are investigating crime, they come to the scene after bodies on the ground. It's too late at that time because you already have victimization at that time, and you can't expect the police to be miracle workers to somehow make the community safer from that type of conduct. So those are the things that communities at large have to come to grips with, and I think that organizations such as yours and others can play a leading, pivotal role in moving forward when it comes to crime prevention and making our streets safer.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Mr. Wally Oppal.